The room got very quiet the second my nephew raised his cup. It wasn't a wine glass. It was a red Solo cup that one of his friends had brought to the table, because he'd already had 2 beers from the restaurant bar, and apparently that wasn't enough. He held it high over his head like he was making a toast at a wedding. He was grinning. That wide, practiced grin he saved for, when he was about to get a laugh at someone else's expense. That someone was me. I had a truck parked outside. A 2021 Ford Ranger, charcoal gray, 4-wheel drive, barely 40,000 miles on it. I had spent 2.5 years saving for it. I drove my old Corolla with the cracked bumper and the AC that quit every August. I skipped every girls' trip my friends planned. I ate lunch at my desk for 2 years straight. I did all of that because I genuinely believed, that this one gift would finally make my nephew see me as something other than the family ATM. He saw the keys. He pocketed them, and then he raised his Solo cup and said, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear, to my Aunt Regan, who actually thought she could buy herself a spot at the table. His friends laughed first, then my brother-in-law chuckled and went back to his phone, and then my sister, my own sister, covered her mouth with her napkin and looked away. Before I tell you what I did next, hit like and subscribe. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know. My name is Regan. I'm 32 years old. I'm a registered dental hygienist. I have a small apartment in a quiet part of town in the Pacific Northwest. I pay my bills on time. I go to the gym 3 times a week. I send birthday cards to people who never send them back. That last part is the part that matters for this story. My nephew Beckett is 19. He just graduated from Lakeview High School in June, and I was at that graduation sitting 3 rows behind his parents with a handmade poster in blue glitter that got all over my car seat. I watched that boy grow up from the day my sister brought him home from the hospital. I babysat him on Friday nights when he was little. I taught him to tie his shoes because my sister was dealing with a rough stretch in her marriage and needed one less thing to manage. When he was 12, I drove 45 minutes to every single one of his Little League games because my brother-in-law Aaron had work travel and my sister Paulette hated sports. I loved him. I still love him. But somewhere around the time he turned 16, something in him shifted. Or maybe nothing shifted. Maybe I just finally started paying attention. He started calling me by my first name at family dinners, not in a casual way. In a deliberate way, like the word aunt was beneath him. He made comments about my apartment being small. He told me once, in front of the entire Thanksgiving table, that I should get a boyfriend because I clearly needed someone to give me a personality. Everyone laughed. My sister said, "Beckett, be nice," in the same voice she used when the dog jumped on the couch. Not a real correction, just noise. I told myself it was teenage stuff. I told myself he'd grow out of it. He graduated in June and had no car, no job lined up, no plan. He was talking about maybe taking classes at the community college, maybe not, maybe just seeing what happened. My sister and brother-in-law were frustrated with him, but they had been frustrated with him for years without doing anything about it. So the frustration had stopped meaning much. I had the money, I had the truck sitting in my head for months. I kept thinking, this is the thing that changes it. A real truck, something he can use to get to work, to haul equipment if he goes into a trade, to become an adult. I thought, if I gave him something that believed in his future, he'd start believing in it too. I know how that sounds now. I bought a 2021 Ford Ranger from a private seller 6 weeks before his graduation. I paid $18,500 out of my savings, money I'd been setting aside for almost 3 years. I paid for 6 months of insurance on it because I knew he had no income yet. I kept the title in my name because I wasn't ready to fully transfer it until we talked through the responsibility together. I drove it to my sister's house the morning of the graduation dinner. I parked it 2 houses down the block so it wouldn't be spotted. I covered it with a tarp I borrowed from my neighbor. I had the key fob in my jacket pocket for the entire 6 hours of the ceremony and the whole drive to the restaurant afterward. We went to Brannigan's, a steakhouse on the west side of town. My sister picked it. I said I'd cover the bill, because of course I did. The table was large. Beckett sat at the head because it was his night. He'd brought 2 friends, both his age, both wearing the same brand of practiced boredom that teenage boys mistake for confidence. Aaron sat at the far end of the table, scrolling through something on his phone. My sister, Paulette, sat next to Beckett, watching him the way she always did. Like he was a lit match she was monitoring from a careful distance. I sat at the corner with the wobbly table leg. All through dinner, Beckett talked loudly with his friends. He did not ask me a single question. He did not look at me when I tried to join the conversation. At one point I said, "Beckett, are you still thinking about the automotive tech program at the college?" He looked at me the way you look at someone who sneezes unexpectedly near your food. "Maybe," he said, and turned back to his friend. My sister refilled her wine glass. The plates were cleared. The waiter asked about dessert. I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the key fob. Small and solid, the Ford oval embossed on one side. "I have something for you," I said. Beckett turned his head slowly, like I'd interrupted something important. I set the key fob on the white tablecloth between us. It made a small, flat sound. "There's a truck parked on Ridgeline Drive," I said. "2 houses down from your parents, gray Ford Ranger. It's yours." Nobody spoke for a few seconds. Then Beckett picked up the key. He turned it over in his hand. His friend Cody leaned over to look. My sister said, "Regan, you didn't." "I did," I said. I was waiting for the moment. The thank you. The look on his face when it landed. I had imagined it probably 100 times on the drive over. The hug, the disbelief, something real between us for the first time in years. His face did change. For about 3 seconds I saw it. The little boy who used to fall asleep on my couch during movie nights. The kid who called me when he was 9 because he was scared of a thunderstorm and his parents weren't home. I saw that kid for 3 seconds. Then he was gone. Beckett leaned back in his chair. He looked at his friends. He picked up his solo cup and he raised it high. He smiled, wide and cold. "To my Aunt Regan," he announced, his voice carrying across the whole dining room. People at the next table looked over. Who actually thought she could buy herself a spot at the table? The laughter came immediately. Cody smacked the table. The other friend doubled over. Aaron let out a short laugh and shook his head slowly, the way you do when a kid says something mildly inappropriate at Thanksgiving, and not something designed to publicly humiliate the person who just handed him $18,000. And my sister. My sister covered her mouth with her napkin. She looked at me for 1 second. Our eyes met. I could see it register on her face. I could see the moment she understood it was wrong. Then she looked away. She let out a small, muffled laugh and said, "Oh, Beckett," in that fond, helpless, dog-on-the-couch voice. They were not laughing with me. There was no version of this where they were laughing with me. I sat very still. My hands were in my lap. I pressed my thumbnail hard into my palm, and I focused on that small pain instead of the one spreading through my chest. 20 years of it came rushing in at once. Every family dinner where I was the punchline. Every time I showed up and got treated like staff. Every apology I accepted that was never real. Every check I wrote and gift I gave into a void that never filled. I had taught them to treat me this way. I kept showing up, I kept giving, I kept hoping. You cannot buy love from people who don't have any for you. My nephew had said it out loud in front of the whole restaurant, and the worst part was he wasn't entirely wrong. "Check, please," I said to the waiter when he passed. "Oh, Regan's got it," Paulette said. She smiled at me, that automatic entitled smile that assumed I would absorb whatever happened and pay on the way out anyway. I looked at her, I did not smile back. I stood up. I put my purse strap over my shoulder. I looked at Beckett. He was already showing the key fob to Cody. "Ranger's not bad," Cody was saying. "We'll take it out to the reservoir this weekend." Beckett didn't look at me. I turned and walked toward the door. "Regan," Paulette's voice shifted. "Regan, the bill." I pushed through the heavy front door. The night air outside was cool and damp the way June evenings are in the Pacific Northwest. I breathed it in. I felt completely calm, and that calmness frightened me a little. I walked to my Corolla. I got in. I sat with my hands in my lap, and I looked at nothing for 2 minutes. Then I started the car and drove home in silence. I waited until 1 a.m. I put on a dark jacket. I drove back to Ridgeline Drive. The neighborhood was quiet, porch lights off. I parked around the corner and walked. My footsteps were soft on the wet sidewalk. The Ranger was still there, still under the tarp. Of course it was. No one had driven out to look at it. The truck I'd spent 2.5 years saving for was sitting exactly where I'd left it, ignored, because the key was already in someone's pocket, and the joke had already been made, and that was all it was ever going to be for them. I pulled off the tarp. I pressed the fob. The lights blinked once. I climbed in. It still smelled like the previous owner's cedar air freshener and the faint ghost of new plastic. I put it in drive and pulled slowly away from the curb, headlights off until the main road. I drove it back to my apartment complex and pulled it into my parking garage next to my Corolla. I sat in the truck for a moment in the quiet. Then I went upstairs and slept 6 hours more than I expected. By morning, there were 38 missed calls. The texts had started around 11 and gotten increasingly frantic. My sister at midnight. Regan, where did you go? You left the bill. My brother-in-law. That was not okay. My nephew at 1:47 a.m. The truck is gone. Did you take it? That's my property. My sister at 2:15. We are going to call the police. I put the phone down. I made coffee. He showed up at my door at 8:30. I heard the knocking from the kitchen and I knew before I reached the peephole. I opened the door. He was wearing the same clothes from the night before. His eyes were red. He hadn't slept. Where is it? He said, not a question. Good morning, I said. Don't do that. His voice was already climbing. Where's the truck? That's my truck. You gave it to me. I handed you a key, I said. The title is in my name, I own it, and after last night I brought it home. He stepped forward. He was taller than me by several inches, and he used that, leaning into the doorframe. You can't take back a gift. The registration is in my name. There's no completed transfer my truck. His face twisted. He said things I won't repeat here. Then he grabbed my forearm. His grip was tight enough that I felt it in my elbow. I stepped back inside. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I called 911. He kept knocking for 4 minutes. The officers arrived in 7. By then, he was pacing in the parking lot. He didn't run. He stayed and argued. I came down, showed them the registration, gave my statement, described what happened to my arm. I filed a full report. The officers told him to leave. He left jaw tight, hands shaking. He went to stay with his friend Cody. 4 days later, Cody asked him to leave. My nephew had been helping himself to the Xbox, the refrigerator, and Cody's patience without replacing any of it. He went back to my sister's. She told him he could stay, but she wasn't covering his phone bill, his gas, or his laundry. She said it quietly. The first time in 19 years she'd said something like it, without softening it immediately. He told her she was acting just like me. He said it like an insult. He stole the truck on a Thursday night, 3 weeks later. I came home from a late shift to find the garage side door glass on the pavement. He'd broken the small pane, reached through, unlocked from the inside. The tarp was folded on the floor. The battery connectors I'd taped as a precaution were sitting on my workbench. He'd watched a YouTube video, apparently. I called 911 before I went back inside. I stood in the driveway and told them my nephew had taken my vehicle. I gave the plate number. I gave his name. I gave everything I had. I did not hesitate. The police were there in 12 minutes. I filed a stolen vehicle report. I pressed charges this time, every one of them. A highway patrol officer spotted the Ranger doing 94 on the interstate 22 miles away. My nephew ran. He made it another 3 miles before he blew through a construction zone at 70 and clipped a concrete barrier. The airbags deployed. He walked away with a broken wrist and a concussion. The truck was totaled. His blood alcohol was .09. The officer called me at 2 a.m. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the details without interrupting. When he finished, I said, "Thank you. I'll be in touch with my insurance in the morning." He mentioned the hospital. I told him I wasn't listed as an emergency contact. His mother was. I did not go to the hospital that night. My sister called me at 2:40. She was crying before she got a full sentence out. He was okay, she said. He was going to be okay. The wrist surgery was minor. The concussion was moderate. He's being charged, she said. Do reckless driving, grand theft auto. I know, I said. I pressed charges. Silence on her end. Good, she said finally. Her voice was barely there. You should have. The insurance paid out on the truck. Full replacement value minus my deductible, clean and straightforward with the police report attached. I didn't buy another truck. I used part of the payout to pay off the Corolla early and put the rest back in savings. The AC still failed every August. I had survived 32 summers. I'd survive more. My nephew's case moved through the system over the following months. His attorney got the felony charge reduced. The ownership situation was complicated enough to argue down in court, though the judge was pointed about what taking a registered vehicle without permission actually constitutes. He was sentenced to 18 months of probation, community service hours, a mandatory DUI intervention program, and court-ordered counseling. He owed restitution on the deductible. I heard the details from my sister in pieces over phone calls that started happening more regularly. She was seeing her own therapist. She and Aaron had started couples counseling. She told me she had spent 19 years building a world where Beckett was never wrong about anything, and she was beginning to understand what that had cost everyone, including him. I listened. I didn't rush back in. I let it be what it was going to be at its own pace. 7 months after the graduation dinner, on a Saturday in late January, I was loading groceries into my trunk in the parking lot when a car pulled in. A beat-up 2009 Civic, dented front quarter panel, mismatched hubcap on the front left. My nephew stepped out. He looked different. The softness in his face was gone. His jaw was sharper. He had on a Carhartt jacket and work boots that were broken in, not bought for aesthetics. A small scar near his left eyebrow from the windshield. He stopped about 10 feet away. He kept that distance deliberately. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I said. He looked at the grocery bags in my trunk for a second, then back at me. He reached into his jacket and brought out an envelope. He held it out with both hands, formal, like he'd practiced the gesture. I walked over and took it. Inside was a money order for $500 and a folded piece of notebook paper. His handwriting, 3 sentences. "This is the deductible. I'll send one every month until it's paid back. I know that's not all of it." I folded the paper and held it. "I'm doing paving," he said. "Nights sometimes. It's hard work." He paused. "I'm not complaining." He looked at the pavement for a moment, then up at me. My counselor kept asking me why I said what I said at the restaurant. First few times I told her it was just a joke. She said to try again. He was quiet for a moment. I said it because it made me feel powerful. Like I had something over you. You always let me have it, so it was easy. A small exhale. I've been trying to figure out when I decided that was okay. I don't have a clean answer yet. I didn't say anything. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right now," he said. "I'm not standing here thinking one envelope fixes it. I just wanted you to know that I know. Not just the truck, all of it. Every time." I stood there in the January cold with a money order in my hand, and I thought about the little boy I taught to tie his shoes on my kitchen floor, the one who called me at 9 p.m. during a thunderstorm because he was scared and couldn't reach his parents. I thought about this restaurant. I thought about driving in the dark at 1 a.m. to take back something that was mine. I thought about my sister's voice at 2:40 in the morning, barely there, saying good. "Keep sending the payments," I said. "Show up to your program, stay out of trouble." He nodded once. "Yeah. That's it for now. That's all I'm asking." He nodded again. He looked like he wanted to say something else, thought better of it, and walked back to the Civic slowly and carefully, the way people move when something still aches. He used his turn signal leaving the parking lot. I noticed that. I carried my groceries upstairs. I put everything away. I stood at my kitchen window for a while and looked at the parking space where the Ranger used to be. The space was empty. It was just a parking space. Concrete and painted lines, as ordinary as anything. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reset. It was something smaller and harder and more honest than either of those things. A door cracked open an inch instead of sealed shut, and I didn't know yet how wide it would ever go, or whether it should go wider. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table. Outside, the January sky was flat and gray and still. I wrapped both hands around the mug, and I just sat there for a while, not thinking about much. It felt for the first time in a long time, like enough.